After you have finished developing your API, it's very important to write a documentation for your API. So what is a documentation? So what is an API documentation? Well, an API documentation is a guide where it shows the user how to use your API. It's very important to include an API documentation after you have finished your project, because otherwise people will not be able to use your documentation, your API effectively. So what do you need to include in your API documentation in order for people or users or even developers to be able to use your API? Well, a good API documentation must include how to use your API, how to make requests specifically, and what is the response that they expect after they make a request. So how to make a request, you need to give examples. So for example, if your endpoint is get_movies.php, you need to type that out and then add, for example, question mark and then name and then equals to the movie name, and then you need to tell them that this is gonna get a movie by name. This is gonna get a movie from the database by giving the API the movie name, and the API is gonna in return is gonna return the movie information. And you need also to tell them, you need to type that the request you need to type the request type. The request type can be get, post, delete, put. It's very important, because if you don't do that, they will be confused and they might use post requests in cases that they should be using get requests, and vice versa. And also you need to tell them about the parameters that they must pass in each single endpoint you have. So we have the get movies, we have create movies, we have update movies, we have delete movies. You need to tell them if they need to pass parameters or not. And then the second thing that you need to include in the API documentation is the expected response, the format of the response. So in our case, the format was JSON, so you need to type that. And also you need to give an example. Here, for example, in this slide, we have the movie name, the key, and then the value, and then the release date, and then the value, and then runtime, and then the value. This is very important, and this is just an example. You need to type, you need to give examples and type that clearly so users don't get confused. So the process of writing an API documentation, it's not difficult at all, but it requires knowing exactly what you need to include. And what you need to include are many things, and the most important things are the how to make requests and the expected response. Of course, if you check many documentations out there, you will find that there are documentations that are much better than others, and the reason is because they invested time writing good API documentation. So my recommendation is that you invest the time after you have finished the project to write that API documentation that includes these important points.